You're tuned in to Career Currency with Kareem Perez, a podcast for people who are interested in unlocking their potential and increasing their professional value. Here's your host, Kareem Perez.
Okay, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Career Currency Podcast, the podcast for people who are interested in unlocking their potential and increasing their professional value. We bring you the best marketers, the best influencers, brand builders. They share the game and career advice on how you can improve, how you can take things to the next level, make more money, and thrive in the digital economy. That's what the Tech Effect's all about. Today's guest is a great guest, award-winning bilingual audience engagement expert who has spent her career using technology to communicate ideas and mobilize people to help those ideas come to fruition. Wow. She has over a decade of experience. Okay, so this is where we're very similar in terms of our experience in the field, doing strategic marketing, branding, communications, all that good stuff for many different clients, but corporate, public sector, and nonprofit organizations. She also has a few accolades. 2014, named Canada's top 30 under 30, marketing professionals by Marketing Magazine. So we're going to definitely talk a little bit more about that. And she's the founder of esbe Consulting. Okay. esbe Consulting, a social impact audience engagement agency that partners with corporate and public sector organizations. And it's all about striving to make a positive change through communications and tech. Which is just amazing,
Thank
so
you.
I'm a huge fan. So our guest today, Sarah Beech. Welcome to the podcast, Sarah. What's up?
Hey.
Yeah, so happy to have you. How's your day going so far?
Good. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having
Thanks
me.
for coming through. First of many, right?
Yes, definitely,
Okay, cool.
definitely.
So I gave you that little intro, right? Told the people about you, but I'm interested to know, how did you get started, right? So is this something you woke up and you were like, I have to be a marketer, like since you were young? Did you stumble on it? Did you go to school for it? How did you even get into marketing to start off?
Kind of all of the above.
Okay.
Initially, I wasn't interested in marketing at all. I really wanted to start out in journalism. My focus was on giving a voice to people who didn't have a voice and making sure they had the opportunity to tell their story, their authentic story themselves. And I found two ways with which to do that: journalism, or the other one was sociology. And when I looked ahead, I found that social really wasn't for me. So, which is what I ended up starting when I went to Laurier in my first year. So I had to pivot halfway through the first year.
Okay.
And then I decided to start with communication studies and political science. Again, the impetus being that influence. So I knew if I couldn't find ways to share stories through journalism, then I can do that in a different way by ensuring that I was able to influence behavior so that people were able to make a positive social impact and contribute to things in different ways. So I really started out looking at marketing through that lens, but it wasn't intentional.
Interesting. And you said you had to pivot, right? So what was that like in terms of changing directions? How did you feel about that? Was it easy? Was it challenging?
It felt good. It was something that I knew I had to do because what I was doing wasn't aligning with who I was and what I wanted to do. So as much as I love sociology and as much as I was really interested in journalism and sharing stories, I found the impact that I wanted to have wasn't really there.
Right.
So at least not in the ways that I thought I could best achieve it. The reason why marketing and political science really spoke to me is because it was really around influencing behavior. So once I felt that sense of alignment, I realized that these are strategies that I can employ in future throughout my career to really influence people and inspire people to create social change.
Right.
And that was really, really, really what I wanted to do. So that pivot, it was challenging at first, but I had the opportunity to really just take a step back, look at things holistically, plan ahead. And that was really why I switched, because looking at the track of where sociology would lead me, for me, wasn't the right fit. So having more doors open through business, having more doors open through poli-sci, that was a better fit for me. And I did that coupled with co-op. So I had some real work experience by the time I left university. So that was helpful.
Okay. So was that facilitated by the university, or did you?
It was.
Okay,
It was part of the university program. So I was actually working by the time I graduated. So I skipped my convocation And I wasn't going to take the day off. I was already making money.
Yeah, for
so I
real.
skipped my convocation and just had them send me my degrees. But it really was, it was a challenging decision to make in the time, but I'm really happy that I made it and it panned out.
Right. Nice. Okay, so let's do a little throwback, 2014. Okay, you're doing your thing, working, right? And you get nominated or you win this award, Canada's Top 30 Under 30.
Yeah.
Was this a surprise for you?
It was.
Okay.
I was flabbergasted when I got the email at first. And I was like, that can't be right. So it was, it was really surprising, but also very inspiring and very thrilling that my work was actually being seen and recognized and that I was nominated. And it was, it was in a pool of a lot of other great candidates doing great things as well. Right. It was really a fantastic time, and it opened a lot of doors. There were people that reached out to me that, your reputation precedes you at that point. So that was really, really helpful too. But it provided me with a platform to do things a little bit differently. It provided me with a platform to really find ways to do that which inspired me most, because I no longer really had to prove myself in terms of what I was able to do. So it really brought with it a lot of privilege.
Nice. And what do you remember what you're doing? What brand were you working with, or what was your role at the time?
Yeah, I was working with Burger King at the time. I was the regional marketing manager, so I managed Central Canada and then Western Canada. And that's when I really focused a lot of the work that I wanted to do in community. So sure, in order to drive sales, you had to sell product, but I really thought there were ways that we can do that more thoughtfully. And I really wanted to find ways to engage with community in order to do that. And that was one of the another pivot in my career in terms of, how we went to market to drive profitability, not just looking at the bottom line, but looking at the impact. What else can we be doing? Who else can we be engaging? What stories aren't we sharing? What communities aren't we reaching? Why? And then let's go and do that. So it really was the impetus for a lot of the things that I really wanted to start working on in my career. And I had a little bit of freedom with which to do that. Right. And when I left BK, I decided to do that in a more fulsome way.
Okay. What are some other accomplishments? I know you've been published. I know you've done some writing.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, what are some other career milestones that you're proud of, or just like fun things you've done, or...
Ooh, that's a hard question.
Or like maybe speaking engagements you've done.
I love doing speaking engagements, but I think a lot of the work that I'm really most proud of is the work that I did with my master's. So I did my master's back at Laurier again. I did a master's in communication studies, media, technology, and culture. And I did a discursive analysis on anti-Black racism in Canadian media and looking at racism and oppression within media. And what it allowed me to do was to really create a workshop that started to dissect how we see multiculturalism marketed in Canada while anti-Black racism and racism continues to exist. So a lot of my writing, a lot of my publications in Huffington Post dealt with that phenomenon and really helped to unpack that in ways that were accessible for people. And then through SB Consulting, I do a lot of workshops that are related to that as well. So that really is the work that I think I'm most proud of.
Nice. That's amazing work. So talk to me about starting your own agency now, right? So you got your 30 Under 30, you kind of found more of your flexibility, your calling, your mission, and then you said, what? I'm just going to start an agency. I'm going to do my thing. How did that happen?
Now, again, that kind of happened by accident. I think it was really just a series of decisions that led me there. Initially, I had no intentions of leaving corporate Canada. Right. I was really focused on kind of climbing that ladder and achieving that success. And I was fortunate insofar as I was able to do that relatively early in my career. And my definition of success changed. So the way that I perceived success before, after having achieved it, differed. So I went for, the things we're socialized to believe, like the title, corner office, the salary, all of those things. And I was, fortunate enough to get there. And I was like, this isn't it. This doesn't quite fit. And, I found the higher I got is the farther away from the impact I wanted to have. So I had to pivot again. And I ended up going to an agency, which was fantastic, equally interested in doing good work. And with some of the members of that team tried to buy the agency. And unfortunately, we couldn't get together. The deal fell through, so we weren't able to, align on kind of all of the pieces. And I kind of realized, I'm like, if I can buy an agency, I can start an agency. And I did. And that's where SB Consulting was really born.
Nice. Amazing. So, so talk about your focus on social impact through the agency. And, I'm assuming it's a differentiator, right? The fact that you do focus on that. But I wanted to ask you, is this something that you saw as like a business differentiator, or is it more that, ingrained into your purpose and your mission, and it's just something that you're not going to do marketing without?
Yeah. It's both.
Okay.
One of the things that SB Consulting really helped to align for me was the personal and the professional. So it was no longer a choice between, does this align with my personal beliefs and does this align with my professional goals? They became one and the same. So as much as it is something that we differentiate on, it's intrinsically who we are. It's our ethos. It's how we navigate. And a lot of the social impact work that we focus on really kind of stems around the UN goals, right? Around ending poverty, gender equity, preventing violence against women, removing gender-based violence, creating social change. And, one of the things that I really liked about working at SB is we have the opportunity to work with folks who also fit that ethos and also have that in mind, whether in the public sector or the private sector. We have a shared understanding. Whereas in corporate, sometimes it was many conversations that had to be had to get people to the point of understanding that this is something we need to be doing, and we can have purpose and profit. They can both coexist. Now we don't have to have those conversations. We really get to the planning. We help individuals envision, strategize, brand, and execute their evolution. And we help them inspire others through marketing, branding, and communication to join a movement. And it's really just intrinsically a part of who we are. And we do that through data-led and research-informed, audience-centered plans. So again, putting that audience at the center, that has been something that I've always done within my career, but sometimes, again, it takes many of those conversations. Right. Now folks get it much more than I think they did in the past. And it's really great to be able to partner with organizations that equally want to do good work and have a positive impact and do that in different verticals.
Okay, so I just want to break down what you just said in terms of the data-led. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, data-led, research-informed, audience-centered plans.
Okay, so data-led, research-informed, audience-centered plans. So in simplified terms, or to say it another way, that's focusing on the audience based on the data you have and the research you do.
That's right.
So it's a two-part element to it.
Yeah. And it's really understanding who our audience is. What are the things that drive them? What are their behaviors and attributes? I've spent a lot of my career working in different places where we have the audience in mind, but more from a conversion standpoint. Right? So we say a lot of the wrong things to the right people in ways they don't want to hear it. So at SB, we flip that around. We say the right things to the right people in ways where it resonates.
Very interesting. Amazing point. Do you have any epic stories or any client situations or even something like, just weird, like you never expected it to happen? Like, over your career, I'm sure you had, different experiences. Mm-hmm. So what are some of your like cool stories that you tell when you talk or, you tell when you meet other agency owners, things like that?
Yeah, I think there are two.
Okay.
One of the ones that, really stands out to me is one of our clients hired us to create a digital resource. So that was it. That was a brief. Create a digital resource. we need a
sounds
digital
like
resource.
A brief. It sounds like a typical brief.
Right?
Yeah.
We need a digital resource and it's got to achieve its purpose. And we're like, okay, which is a really great place to be, but a really daunting place to be, right? Because, there are no corners and edges, which is fantastic. You can be as creative as you want, but there are no corners and edges, right? So, kind of got to work building this out and realized that, they don't need a resource, right? The ask wasn't really what was going to solve the problem. They need a framework. And, but the framework has to come in campaign. So we ended up building out this larger piece. And we actually did some in-kind work to support it as well because it was really important work that they were engaged in. Mm-hmm. And we brought it back to the client. They loved it. We launched a huge campaign. It got amazing traction, was picked up in media, really exceeded our expectations, but went very well and according to plan. And I found out maybe about a month and a half after that project has closed that they actually took that work international. Okay. And so there are a lot of partners that they were working with in international spaces that were benefiting from that framework and that resource. Right. And that was one of those, moments that are just like, wow, like this really, we went above and beyond, and the impact of that work had a multiplier effect that we didn't even see. It wasn't even something that I'd considered.
Right. Something you can't predict.
Exactly. And it was very cool to see that my work had been in places and spaces that I didn't even imagine. And that really helped open up my eyes to some of the possibilities that I hadn't considered.
And then I guess, so talk about like, maybe that's like active listening, or because they said they needed a digital resource, right? So what are some of the steps you took to understand what they actually needed versus what they said they needed?
I looked at what our objective was, right? So they really wanted to promote gender equity. And it's like, okay, well, who are we talking to? And really broke it down from there. Who are we talking to? What do we know about the behaviors of this audience? What do we know about, what you've done before that hasn't worked? What can we learn from that and pivot on and do differently? And so really, and that's part of that data-led and research-informed aspect. Right. And one thing that really came out in that campaign is we found a whole new audience that they hadn't considered. And that's because we didn't just stick to the brief. We didn't talk to who you thought your key audience was. Right. We found more a different subset of your key audience. And that opened up a lot of avenues for them as well. And by the end of that pitch, we literally had former contracts with that client. Right. More work than we could take on, really, at the time. Yeah. And it was a really great place to be because we didn't just take it at face value. It wasn't just, here's the problem, we need a solution. It was, okay, well, why? Why is a solution, is this the solution you think you need? But most importantly, what's the solution that your audience thinks would best fit?
Wow, sounds amazing. Amazing approach. Any other accomplishments from the agency that you want to share? Oh, you said you had two stories, actually.
I did. Thank you. No. The second one was equally as surprising for me. I was at a client event, and we're just kind of, milling around, meeting with people, shaking hands, etc. It was a great event, a great client. And they introduced me to somebody, and, before she said my name, the woman that they introduced me to said, "Oh, you're Sarah Beech." And I was like, yeah, and you are. And she introduced herself. And it turned out that she was actually on the funder side. So she'd actually been funding the work that our client hired us to do. And she's like, "I love your work." And I was like, wow, thank you. And it was, again, one of those instances where you don't really realize who's paying attention and, making sure that we were achieving all of our deliverables to make sure that, the funding was being used in the right ways. But to actually, have her know who I was and know our work and look into us because she was so impressed with the work that we produced was something else that I was just floored about.
Amazing. So what's next for the agency? What are some of the things you're focusing on now, in your sector of work and in your, in your lane? Like, where do you see it going? What are some of the things that you're trying to implement, trying to advise clients on? Like there's that quote or that saying, the puck is going somewhere, so you got to be there before it gets there, right? Yeah. So thinking futuristic, like, what are some of the things that you're envisioning need to change, or some strategies in your mind?
Yeah, from the client perspective, there are a lot, and it really depends on where the clients are and kind of their evolution.
Right.
Digital's the biggest, right? So making sure, one of the conversations that, we have a lot with clients is around how are you integrating digital into your organization? What does that streamline look like? What does that upskilling look like for your employees? How are you making sure that they have the tools and resources they need to do their job with these new tools in these new ways? And whether that, whether we're your outside marketing team that, feels like your in-house marketing team, but making sure that we're aligned in terms of what that looks like and making sure that they have the resources or at least the foresight in the planning and their plans to make sure that this is accounted for later. As it relates to us, that's really one of the things that I'm looking at for 2024. I think one of the big lessons that I came out of the pandemic with from a business standpoint is scaling and the importance of scaling. Mm-hmm. So, the pandemic was some of our busiest years, and it was a rough time for a lot of folks for a lot of different reasons. And when it comes to business, we had a lot more work where people were taking their offline spend and putting it online and just pivoting with the whole digital transformation. A lot of folks weren't ready, which resulted in a lot of work for us. Scaling was a big piece of that. Finding the right people, having them on the right portfolios at the right time is really important. So that's really what I'm looking at for 2024. We got to scale up a little bit.
Yeah, and as a leader, what are some of the things you're focused on in terms of like upskilling yourself and get better so you can lead the charge of this amazing agency and this great work?
Yeah, AI.
Okay.
AI right now is taking up a lot of my time in a good way because there's so much to learn and it's happening so fast. So, you have clients that are interested in it. You want to make sure that you're recommending things that are the right fit. I've attended lots of conferences and heard from some of the best and brightest minds on AI and finding ways to implement that and integrate it into our business. We hear that AI is going to take over jobs. It's not. It means we're going to have to do things differently. It's not that it's not going to, but the best way to ensure, that it doesn't make anything obsolete or that you remain relevant is to ensure that you find ways to proactively engage in that and proactively understand, how can this impact my industry? How can this impact my job? How can this solve pain points for my clients? And making sure that you're up to date on that. So AI right now is really the focus. Is the focus right now.
Yeah. So career wise, whether it's working for brands or just like running and starting the agency, I want to get a better understanding of, some of your challenges or some of your struggles. Like, what are some of the things that, what are some of the times you were like, man, why am I doing this? Should I turn it back? Should I not? Right? Because again, like starting your own thing, being entrepreneurial, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah.
Right. And, can you talk maybe about one or two of those things? And then, of course, how did you overcome or how did you persevere through, which is important as well?
Yeah, I think, everything is cyclical. And I think it's in some of those lower peak business times where you're like, did I make the right decision? Is this the right thing to do? And you got to stick with it. You really got to stick it out. For me, because it was built in purpose, it wasn't a question of why, it's a question of how. I know why I did this. How am I going to do this next thing? How am I going to get this next client? How am I going to, find this next contract? How am I going to ensure that we continue to grow and deliver and maintain the integrity of our work? How am I going to achieve these things? And how am I going to rest while I do it all, right? And that was a big one, I think, in our early years, it was rough. It was hustle. I was thinking about it all the time. And it was, not taking any time off, right? And part of what we're socialized to believe entrepreneurship is that, right? It's always being the hustle, always with the hustle culture, which yes, and you need rest. You need to take a moment to step back. You need to be able to have that perspective. You need to be able to know when to pivot, know when to let go, know when to, let go of that task and let someone else on your team take it over. Right. That was a big one for me. So it was never a question of why, it was always a question of how. And, my answer always is, incremental steps, doing the right things, even when you feel like it's not making any impact. What are the small things that you can do to have that impact that you're looking for? What are the small things that you can do to get you to the larger wins? And do that in the quiet times as well. Planning is extremely important. I'm a huge procrastinator sometimes, but always let things percolate in the back.
Yeah.
But, that plan, when you don't have to be somewhere, you've got to push yourself to get there, right? So that and just making sure that, being accountable to our clients and accountable to my team as well.
Amazing. Okay, so let's make a little shift, right? Let's talk about digital skills because, that's my thing, right? Yeah. At the Tech Effect, we're here to empower, anyone who wants to learn digital skills and use it to their advantage, whether it's career or entrepreneurial wise. So you already talked about AI, right? Which is part of what I talk about is like how you're adjusting to technologies. But what are some of the aspects of like machine learning and automation that you're already using, right? Like, because for example, with the digital space and ad buys and stuff, like I know there's like a lot of systems in there. They find audiences for you, they run your ads for you, they do your bidding. So yeah, can you talk a little bit more about like technology and AI and what are you seeing?
Yeah. So from the media side, definitely a lot of that already is kind of baked in and happening.
Right.
We're looking at things a little bit from the bot side when it looks into, like what's the client experience? What are some of the experiences that we can curate and create? But right now, because a lot of what we do is rooted in social impact, there's also a lot of bias in a lot of the things that exist.
Right.
And, right now we're still exploring a lot of what that looks like. But we know from a lot of the research that exists, humans created it. So there's a bias already that's inherent there. We know that a lot of especially the large language models, right? The learning from data that exists already within the internet. We know there's a lot of bias and worse out there as well. Right. So bias in, bias out. And then that's coupled with the fact that there's a lack of representation in tech already. So folks who can share some of the checks and balances around some of this machine learning, right, and help to facilitate some of the unlearning of this machine learning aren't at the table, and they're not part of those conversations. So, very cognizant about that. I think there are a lot of ways that AI can be used to, create a lot of content, for instance, generate a lot of different images. But there was a recent study that was done that looked at text to visual conversion and found that there was significant bias in some of the prompts that were used when you're talking about things like reporters or, press or journalism, right? A lot of the images that came back or that were populated as a result of that were rife with bias. There was ageism, there was sexism, there was racial bias where people who were presented were actually premised on whiteness. There was urbanism, right? So people are being centered in cities and you're excluding all of these rural areas. There are a lot of issues that are still with AI. So it's something that we're looking at and monitoring because it's part of the ecosystem, but it's not yet something that we're fully integrating into our service offerings or portfolios because those checks and balances aren't quite there.
Nice. Yeah, and it's so important, like even the concept of professional, right? What does that look like?
Exactly.
So you hit the nail on the head.
And AI will give you a really different answer.
Yeah, exactly, right? So what are some technical skills, right? So I'm starting off in marketing or advertising. I just, finished school and I'm like, hey, I need to have some hard skills that I can get in my first career opportunity.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you suggest? Obviously there's a wide range, but yeah, what are some?
Yeah, it varies. There's a lot out there. The one thing, I kind of take this approach. There was a time where, everyone thought that when it came to technology, hardware led, but it was actually software that leads, right? Software has to inform your hardware choice.
Right.
So I don't always think about it as tech that leads. I think about it as what are we trying to understand, right? And I found that understanding analytics is a great impetus to understanding technology, right? Being able to understand what aspects of tech you want to measure, what you want to create, and being able to interpret that information as well, I found has been really helpful. So I think, there's some obvious ones when you're talking about campaigns. You want to understand Google Analytics. Right. You want to know how to, leverage meta platforms. You want to be able to use pixels. You want to be able to understand what that data you're going to get back is and what that journey is going to be for your audience as well when we talk about remarketing. But then there are some, hard skills as well that come into play. So coding might be a really good one if you're into web design. That's super interesting. But also make sure that you're coding the right things or that you're learning the right coding language, right? There are a lot of different ones that are out there. So really understand what you want to achieve and then work backward from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then what about on the transferable side, right? So used to be called soft skills or, not really soft skills at all, but what are those transferable skills where, a lot of times I'll, speak or I'll talk to people and I'm like, I could teach you, right? Or you can learn this hard skill. You can learn how to code online or through programs, right? So sometimes a lot of people have the hard skill. But what are some of the transferable skills that stand out to you if you're looking at a candidate to hire or just like working with different people in the space?
Hard skills are important. You've got to be able to do the work. For me, I look at attitude, right? I can teach you how to do anything, but I can't teach you how to have a good attitude. I can't teach you how to have a positive outlook. Attitude to me is always important. So even if you don't have all of the skills that meet the job description to the T, if you have a good attitude, I know that we can get you there. So that's always my preference. But also people who are willing to put in the work, right? Do you go above and beyond? What did your program require? What did you do with that? Did you volunteer? Did you start a school club? do you engage in other volunteering opportunities outside of your profession? Really just looking at somebody holistically, because we can learn to do a lot of things, but we can teach people to do anything. But again, it comes down to attitude and aptitude.
Right. Okay, so yeah, so attitude and aptitude. I want to switch a little bit to the agency side, and talk about, what mistakes are agencies making, particularly around their people, and how they can keep them. Right, there's agencies are known for high turnover, right, and there's a huge talent gap as well. I mean, the industry is kind of tricky right now. There's layoffs on one end and a talent gap on the other. But how can agencies and the industry as a whole, improve the employee experience when it comes to onboarding, training, retention, things in those areas?
Yeah, that's a great question. Agencies kind of have a bad rap when it comes to employee engagement, right?
For real.
They kind of burn hard and fast, and I know that was one of the reasons for a long time in my career why I stayed out of the agency world, because your employment was contingent on the account. If the account went away, so did your job in a lot of instances, right? For some of those dedicated folks. I think one of the things that we can really focus on, and I think organizations are shifting toward this, is really focusing on the employees and the needs of employees, and making sure people have the flexibility that they're looking for, and just listening more to what employees want. But I think from, one of the things the agencies can do better is really just, focusing as much on the people as they do on the business, because ultimately you don't have one without the other.
So you said earlier, purpose and profit?
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah, but also, but from
or
the
people and profit.
People and profit,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And mentorship, right? So also, I want to know, have you had a mentor? You've done all this great work, right? So was there somebody that could guide you along this path, or did you really just have to figure it out on your own?
Yeah. Somebody asked me once, they're like, "Who's your mentor?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, I talk to my mom a lot."
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, your mom's your mentor." And I was like, "Oh, my mom is my mentor
Yeah,
in a lot
real,
of ways.
real, yeah.
My mom is my mentor." I haven't had, it's hard with mentorship because I haven't had a formal quote unquote mentor, but I've had a lot of people that have helped guide me throughout my career. Whether that's showing me what to do or what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to say the people that have been most influential to me have been, those colleagues in places and spaces where they help me navigate the culture.
Right.
Navigating culture in organizations is tremendously important, sometimes more important than your ability to do the work itself. And, especially earlier on in my career, those folks who helped show me the ropes, those were definitely some important mentors in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Mentorship could take so many different forms: formal, informal, long-term, short-term. But do you mentor now?
I have. It's actually something I want to get back into doing. It's been a while since I've been mentoring. I'm currently part of a group called The Forum, and that's a collective of women entrepreneurs where we do mentorship. So I am waiting to be paired with my mentee through that forum. But it's, I think it's important to give back. I think it's important to, take our lessons, and if you can help someone find a shortcut or a shorter route to make some, to learn something faster, then why not do that? And that's something I'm looking forward to imparting, because I had the benefit of that from some folks as well. But I think it's especially important for women, especially important for racialized women, that we have people who are able to help support us and help us navigate culture and navigate some of the obstacles that may be put in our path, and to really help be sponsors for the work that we do next and the next steps in our career.
Right. Yeah, and just to expand on that, how important it is to have a mentor that shares your racial and cultural identity.
Tremendously important. I don't know. It's actually, I've never had a mentor that's kind of shared my identity, with the exception of my mother.
Right.
And we come from vastly different worlds in profession. by profession. So, I think it's really important to have someone who understands your experience, who understands, your lived experience, both at work and outside of work, because one very much informs the other. And it can really help you navigate some of those places and spaces, because there are challenges that we face that others don't. And I think, when we look at things like intersectionality, we know that it's important to kind of peel back each of those layers.
So if I know somebody looking for a mentor,
hit me up.
I can call you.
Hit
All
me
right,
up.
cool. Let's kind of continue on the diversity side, right? So multicultural marketing. Talk about that importance of having a diverse team and thinking about campaigns from a diverse perspective. I mean, we see a lot of campaigns that's like, yo, why? How did that get approved?
Yeah.
How did that get through? And so many cultural insensitivities.
Yeah.
But from a business perspective and just from an overall like brand perspective, how important is multicultural perspectives?
Yeah, it's so important. I think if we're going to have multicultural marketing, then we're not doing it right.
Right.
It's got to be. It's already not inclusive if you have to have multicultural marketing.
Love that.
And to me, that's the problem. What are we really doing to make things inclusive? Who's around the table that has power and the ability to speak truth to power in these instances where these decisions are being made? I was guest lecturing at George Brown once, and I taught a course on marketing authenticity, and it was all around all of the errors that organizations have made in marketing, like huge campaigns,
for real,
right? Like
for real.
Dove was one of them, Pepsi was another, where they just completely did not understand the effects of what they were doing. And, there are a lot of verticals that, we can speak to as it relates to, different ethnicities. But again, if you're not coming from inclusion or starting with inclusion, there's no need to include voices separately and distinct, right? I think there are ways to have campaigns that are representative of a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. And then again, that speaks to the importance of starting with the audience.
Right. Absolutely. And then let's talk about representation, so women in tech, Black professionals in tech and marketing and advertising. In your opinion, how's it progressing? Where are we at?
So slowly.
So
slowly. I think we're still underrepresented, especially when we look at Black women in tech, right? Extremely underrepresented. I think there are a lot of organizations out there that are doing some really good work. I think, change is coming. I don't think it's coming at the pace that we would expect, which is ironic given how quickly tech moves.
Right.
I think we could move some of this change a little bit faster. But, it's happening. And I think it's happening slowly. But again, there are a lot of organizations out there doing some really important work and working to ensure that we have representation at earlier ages in STEM amongst Black people and Black women in particular, and that we have those skills that are required so that we can get some of these tech jobs later and help to really influence the market in ways that we haven't yet had the opportunity to. And hopefully with that comes funding as well, because we know that funding is a significant part of getting your venture to market. Yeah.
And it's just so important to have that representation and show the real career pathways, the possibilities.
Absolutely.
And expose people to that. Okay, so I think we're done for the most part, right? We have like a little bit of a speed round. So yeah, we'll kind of end it there. But I want to learn a little bit more about you. So what's your favorite food if you had to, I mean, I wouldn't say you're going to throw it down in the kitchen and make it, but if you were going to eat something, what's your go-to?
Honestly, one of my favorite foods, oysters.
Okay.
I love oysters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where did you pick that up?
But my mom introduced me to them, when I was younger, and I love them.
Okay,
I just always loved them. So over the pandemic, I actually learned how to shuck them.
Oh, okay.
So now I feel
nice.
like, I have my little shucking glove and my little knife and get my little oysters together.
Cool,
I love it.
Favorite place to travel?
Caribbean.
Any more specific?
I love going to Jamaica. I love going back to Jamaica. Yeah.
Why?
Just
Food?
the vibe, the food,
vibe,
the sea.
Yeah.
It feels like home. It's that as soon as the plane touches down, it just relaxes me.
Yeah.
So as much as I love traveling to other places, there's something about going back to Jamaica that just feels like home.
Cool. Favorite app or most used app?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I like Trello. It keeps me organized.
Okay, organized. Yeah.
It keeps me organized,
Yeah,
keep me
that's
together.
good. Yeah, Trello's
Yeah,
dope. Trello's
Trello,
dope.
yeah.
Book or podcast? Have you written a book
I have not written a book
yet?
yet.
Okay,
I have not written a book
Favorite
yet.
book or podcast?
Favorite book. I like Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay.
Okay,
Yeah.
haven't read that.
Yeah, it's a really good book. I like a lot of her books, actually. That one happens to stick out. Ooh, and so does Eloquent Rage, actually, as well. It's another,
okay.
it's a really good book.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what style of books are they?
They're about, so Roxane Gray's Bad Feminist is really about looking at her interpretation of feminism and, and creating more space for what that means. And I love that because, there are just so many different ways to come at different things.
Dope.
Yeah,
Dope.
I like
And,
a lot of her perspectives.
And what was the other one about?
Eloquent Rage. Oh my goodness, I can't remember who. I should know. I forgot who wrote that. I think it's Dr. Brittany Cooper. And I met her at in Ferguson when I went to Ferguson to protest the murder of Michael Brown. I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Brittany Cooper, and so she wrote Eloquent Rage. Yeah, I think she goes by Professor Crunk.
Okay. Oh, for
Yeah,
real? Huh?
yeah.
That's dope. That's dope. Okay, and then last thing is, end it with a word of advice. Maybe for, not necessarily your younger self, but for, that younger version of you, somebody else that's coming up now, and they're questioning or doubting themselves, and they're not sure. What would you say to that person? How would you inspire them? How would you pep talk them?
I'd say know your purpose. If you know your purpose, you can't get lost. Failure is inevitable. And if you're going to fail forward and fail fast. Make sure that, whatever you're learning, whatever that failure was, make sure you're learning from it and you're applying it to your next step. Don't get stuck in it. Just keep it moving.
Amazing. All right, y'all. A lot of keys, a lot of actions to take. Sarah Beech, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For coming through. Definitely going to have a part 2 follow-up. But yeah, a lot of keys. You talked about your career, talked about mentorship, digital skills, technology, diversity, lots of knowledge. So appreciate your time, appreciate your energy today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, y'all. So that's another episode. Thank you for joining. I'm Kareem Perez, your host, and we'll see you next episode.
You're tuned in to Career Currency with Kareem Perez, a podcast for people who are interested in unlocking their potential and increasing their professional value.